Chapter 7. James Edwards stood across the street from the building, whose address matched that on the card in his hand. It was a mild day, the smog wasn't too bad, and he thought he heard a bird singing. Either that or somebody's car alarm in the distance. During the winter, first time the snow fell and covered the city, making everything pristine white for a few moments, it looked nicer, but for New York in the summer, it was about as good as it got. He looked at the structure. It was a squat, square building. He probably had passed it 100 times and never noticed it before. Big deal. He'd lived in New York City all his adult life, and there were thousands of buildings he'd never noticed unless a perp ran into one. Oh well. He tapped the card, then jaywalked across the street, ignoring the cabbie who honked at him. Inside, the place had a weird look to it. The security door was heavy steel with mesh as thick as pencils. That was normal enough, but one whole wall was dominated by huge blades of a tunnel vent air intake. Made no sense to put that in the lobby. The designer must have been on drugs. The place wasn't big enough to need that much air. There was a single elevator at the far end of the room, and an old security guard sat perched on a folding metal chair halfway between the entrance and the elevator. He was reading a comic book. Talk about cheap. They couldn't even give the guy a desk. Edwards walked toward the guard, his footsteps echoing hollowly in the mostly empty room. The old geezer looked up. Help you? Yeah, I got this card, elevator, the guard cut in. Pushed the call button. He looked back down at his comic, cackled at something funny in the book. Edwards shook his head and walked to the elevator. Here was a no-class place. Why would this guy K want to meet him here? Why would anybody want to come here at all? As he approached the elevator, the doors whipped open just like on Star Trek. There was nobody inside. What the hell? He stepped inside, hit the call button. Nothing happened. He reached out to hit the button again. Somebody cleared their throat behind him. Edward spun. The back wall of the elevator was gone, and there was another weird room in front of him. Half a dozen men sat in egg-shaped chairs, all of the guys looking at him. There was one empty chair. An old guy in a black suit, white shirt, and tie stood facing the chairs, dressed just like Kay had been. Maybe they got a discount on the suit somewhere. Bulk rate, probably. You are late, the old guy said. Have a seat. Edward shrugged, moved to the empty chair. The elevator door slid shut. The old guy nodded and said, My name is Zed. You are here because you are the best of the best. You number among the best Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and New York's finest. Some of the other 6 men, all short-haired and straight-spined, cast glances at Edwards, where he slouched in his chair. Military dudes, all of them. He knew the look. Smug bastards. He smiled and gave it right back to them. The old man said, We are looking for just one of you. What will follow is a series of simple tests to quantify your motor skills, hand-eye coordination, concentration, and stamina. Edwards raised his hand. Yes, you have a question, or do you need to go to the bathroom? Yeah, I must have lost my notebook. Why exactly are we here? One of the other dudes shot his hand into the air. Oh man, there was always one fool like him in school. I know, pick me. Zed nodded at the guy. Son? The guy said, Jake Jensen, sir, West Point, first in my class. We are here because you're looking for the best of the best of the best, sir. Edwards laughed. He tried to stifle it, but not too hard. Zed looked at him like he was a dog who'd piddled on the rug. Something funny we are missing here? Best of the best of the best. Sounds like a rap song. He looked around, expecting to see smiles. Didn't see any. Oops. Nobody was with him here. He shook his head. These military dudes were tight-assed. They had no sense of humor. Gung-ho in the Valley of Death, all that shit. Stupid. It, struck me as funny, Edwards finished. Zed gave him another of those dog just peed the carpet looks. Okay, let's move on. The other 6 guys stood as one, like they were machines. Edwards got to his feet more leisurely. Whatever these dudes were into, he didn't think he wanted to be part of it. But he might as well go alone and see where it led, given that he'd come this far. Edwards looked at the test paper on his lap, then around at the other 6 men, who likewise had papers balanced on their knees trying to write on them. This was stupid. They couldn't come up with some desks. There was a small table against one wall. Nobody was using it. Hell with this. He got up, walked over to the table, and dragged it back in front of his little egg chair. The other testees glared at him as he moved the table. It made considerable racket scraping across the floor, but hey, that wasn't his problem. He wasn't going to be punching no holes into his good pants for some silly-ass IQ test. And he had to say it was pretty damn silly. If you hold a spoon under the stream of water running from the faucet into your kitchen sink, the water will spray farthest from it. A, bowl up, or B, bow down. Man, what kind of question was that? They must not be looking for rocket scientists here. That was for damn sure. Edwards pondered over another silly question. Mr. White drove a train. Mr. Lee had a dog. Mrs. Jones did not go to church on Sunday. Mr. Chin lived next to Mrs. McGraw. A whole bunch more crap like that. Then you get to the bottom. They asked, who owns the zebra? There wasn't a thing in there about any damn zebra. How were you supposed to figure that out? Who gave a rat's ass? What would they want with a zebra anyhow? He could just see trying to take a striped jackass for a walk in the park. Big dogs chasing it, muggers trying to rip it off, plus the baggies you'd have to carry to clean up after the damn thing would have to be garbage can sized. He could just see himself leading the zebra with one hand and a bag full of road apples in the other. Who owns the zebra? Man. He noticed Zed glance over toward a smoked glass panel in one wall. Somebody on the other side of it. Edwards couldn't make out who, watching. Hell with this. This didn't get more interesting pretty quick. He was going to take a hike. Zed herded the 7 of them into another room. This one was really weird because it was triangular shaped. There was nothing in it but a counter, and on the counter, 7 handguns. Looked like SIGs, 9s or 40s. What were they going to have to field strip the pieces? Maybe they were going hunting for zebras. He was tempted to ask the jarhead next to him what else could he be with that Semper Fi tattoo on his forearm, while they were here. Nah, he decided. No point in getting that best of the best crap thrown at him again. He'd figure it out. All of a sudden, the walls just kind of pulled apart, and all of a sudden there was a shitload of stuff going on. Lights flashing, sirens screaming, and all kinds of things. Bug-eyed monsters, ugly critters, even a little girl, all right there. Gentlemen, protect yourselves, an amplified voice yelled. Hogan's Alley, Edwards realized, a shooting gallery. The 7 of them all went for the pieces. This was obviously a hand-eye motor skill can-you-shoot-worth-a-crap test. Edwards snatched up one of the pistols, checked out the horde of creatures. 6 shots went off. Pretty much all together. Damn, these guys were fast. He picked his target and fired, nearly a second behind the other 6. He pulled the trigger again for a double tap to make sure, but the gun clicked empty. Only 1 round. Interesting. The targets froze. The lights dimmed. The siren stopped. The 6 guys all looked at each other, then at Edwards. He could almost hear what they were thinking. Too slow, pal. You are history. Gentlemen, table your weapons, please. Zed stepped into the room. He walked straight to Edwards. The other 6 tried to hold their smiles in check. Took your time, didn't you? I needed to be sure of my targets, sir. Zed turned and looked at the targets. The most obvious in the frozen holographic crowd, and Edwards was pretty sure that's what it was, a hologram, was the big, snarling beast that looked kind of like the Tasmanian Devil from the Warner Brothers cartoons. It had 3 holes in its chest. Next to Taz was a really ugly sucker who looked like some pissed-off god had given it a fish hook for a head. It also had 3 holes at the center of mass. At the back of the horde was an 8-year-old girl. She had a single bullet hole right between her eyes. Zed looked back at Edwards. Mind if I ask why you felt little Tiffany back there deserved to die? One of the military yahoos snickered. Son, she was the only one who seemed dangerous. A couple more of the military guys chuckled. And you came to that conclusion how? Well, your hook-headed guy, he can't have any brains in that thing, so they are probably in that beanbag connected to it with that umbilical there. And since he's not carrying it, he isn't coming at us. And that butt-ugly thing there, it looks like he's snarling. But what I think is, he's sneezing. That looks like Kleenex in his hand. Got to figure a guy sneezing isn't much of a threat. Besides from his eyes, you can see he's not even looking at us. The little girl, well, she doesn't really look like a little girl should. The face is crooked, the stance is weird. She doesn't really look like a little girl ought to. And why is she in this crowd? Nobody is holding her hostage, and anybody looking for a threat would probably consider her the last target they'd shoot at. That's it? That looks like a knife in her hand. What knife? I don't see a knife. It was there before. Either she dropped it or you made it go away. You saying we cheated, son? I didn't say that. You did. Edward shrugged. Besides, there's the books. What about them? Way too advanced for somebody her age. Look at the titles. You can see that? Zed looked at the other 6 men and shook his head. They mirrored his gesture. Well, okay, so he wasn't going to qualify first, Edwards thought. Big, hairy deal. He didn't even know what he was supposed to be qualifying for, but he smiled along with the other 6. He was going to get kicked out. He was going to look cool when it happened. And unlike these gun-ho sifts, he could do cool. Edwards said, So what's next, Chief? He improvised. What be the test for the best of the best of the best of the best best? Any fool could do bad rap. It didn't take any talent. Good rap was hard. Weren't but a few could pull that off. But even the bad stuff still found an audience. Shoot, TV could make almost anyone look good doing it these days. Zed apparently was not a fan from his expression. Well, too bad. Kay stood in the hall, watching the would-be recruits through the smoked glass, smiling. He hefted the thick manila folder he held as Zed came in, shaking his head. Your boy has a real problem with authority. He got the right target. Your military mopes cooked a harmless Contivian leaf-eater with a head cold and a hook-head kitten who only wanted to lick their faces, Kay offered. He's going to be more trouble than he's worth. Hell, Zed, the kid ran down a cephalopod on foot and then walked away from a hand-to-hand with it. How many people we got can do that? You made up your mind already, haven't you? No point in me even saying anything, is there? I hope you know what you are doing. I almost never do, but that never stopped me before. No, that's true. Zed shook his head again. Let's wind it down. Kay watched as Zed rounded the corner and went back into the shooting gallery. The older man led the recruits back to the main interview room. Kay followed them. Saw Edwards see him. Hey, it's Mr. Kay. How you doing? Kay smiled. The kid did have a certain charm. Reminded him of himself 30 years ago. Hold up there, sport, Kay said. Edwards hung back a little. Zed took the other 6 men ahead. You want to know what is going on? The kid shrugged. Been having so much fun it doesn't really matter. But if it makes you happy... As they walked, Kay said, back in about 1954 or 55, the government started a little underfunded agency with the simple purpose of making contact with a race not of this planet. It seemed pretty funny at the time, so the government didn't exactly spread the word far and wide. The money got bled off some slush funds, and only a handful of people even knew the agency existed. He tapped the folder with his free hand. Ahead of them, Zed led the 6 troopers into a small alcove. One final test, gentlemen. If you'll look right here, he held up a neutralizer. Edward started to move in that direction. Kay grabbed his arm. Where are you going? Dude's getting another test. I don't want to be left out. Yeah, you do. This way. Look over there. Edwards turned to look. The neutralizer's flash strobed the wall, but the reflection wasn't enough to cause any harm. You had to be looking directly at it. Edwards started to turn around. Don't bother, son. They have other things on their mind right now. He handed Edwards the folder. Check out the pictures. The first one was back when he was a trainee, early 60s. Nine of the team, all in their standard black suits, standing around a metal desk under fluorescent lights, pale skins, looking like Dracula's kids. God, had he ever been that young? Nice, Edwards said. Thing is, the aliens made contact upstate New York back in the early 60s. Edwards shuffled to the next picture. A grainy B&W of 2 ships hovering in the night sky, classic flying saucer stuff. There were 7 men in black then. That's what the MIB stands for, and it's as good a name as any, plus an amateur astronomer who spotted the ship, and one stupid kid who got lost on a back road on his way to pick up his date and happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. We all got to the ships right after they landed. The next picture showed the ship, the hatch open, unmistakable alien shapes inside. At the portal, a very young-looking Kay stood, holding a bouquet of flowers. Go on. You brought flowers to the little green men? They moved into B corridor, impossibly long for the building in which they were in. Kay noticed, as always, the odor of spice as he entered the corridor. Kay said, the first one were intergalactic refugees, and they were looking for some place apolitical, a neutral place where a few of them at a time could hang out, kind of like Switzerland, or maybe like Rick's place in Casablanca. I saw that movie. Pretty good. The powers that were decided to go along with it. The next picture was a killer. Hey, that's the World's Fair out in Queens, right? Still under construction. We studied about it in state history. Up on those towers are those, yes, the flying saucers from the first meeting. You mean the World's Fair was a cover-up for alien contact? Why else would anybody have a World's Fair in Queens? Edwards nodded. I hear that. He paused for a second, then said, so you are saying the Earth is like Rick's place in Casablanca, is that right? More or less. We have a small non-human population now living among us in secret. Do tell. Don't take offense, Mr. Kay, but when was the last time you had a CAT scan? Couple months ago. Company policy. Twice a year, full-scale physical. I didn't have a brain tumor then. So it's either drugs or some kind of psychosis, is that it? Well, thanks for the visit and all, but I think maybe it's time for me to be heading on back to the precinct. The Sarge will be worried about me, you know." Kay shrugged as they came abreast of the kitchen. The door was closed. "If that's what you want, let me grab a cup of coffee here and I'll show you the way out." He opened the door and held it for Edwards. The kid took 2 steps and stopped as if he'd turned to stone. Kay had to smile. 3 Vermars, tall and reedy aliens who looked a lot like man-sized centipedes balanced on their tails, stood next to a water cooler shooting the breeze. They spoke Vermorinian, which always sounded to Kay like a cross between Esperanto and microphone feedback, and they smelled like fresh donuts. Iggy, the senior of the tirade, waved a pusapod at Kay as he went to get coffee. "How they floating, Iggy? Dammin', don't tell me we are out of cream again. All we got is this powdered shit." Iggy chittered, pointing at the counter. "Oh yeah, thanks, I didn't see it." He found the cream behind a box of stale donuts. "Thanks, Iggy." Kay poured some cream into his coffee, stirred it, then looked at Edwards. "Okay, kid, you ready to roll?" Edwards stood there, with his mouth open, staring. Kay nodded at the Vermars. "See you around, guys." They gave him some feedback squeals and waved. Kay walked to where Edwards stood, put one finger under his chin, and pushed his mouth closed. "For future reference, this is a better look for you," he said. "Besides, some of our clients take that mouth open as a threat, you know." "Take that open mouth as a threat, you know." Edwards looked at him. "Come on, kid, let's go take a walk. I'll fill you in on what you need to know." He took the kid out the back way. No point in rattling him any more than he already had been. He was going to be all right. Kay was pretty sure of it. After doing the job for 30 years, you got a feel for people. Of course, he and Dee had been partners for so long he hadn't ever had to break in a new one for himself, though he had done basic training on a bunch of the boys before shipping them off to their assignments. Some of those special forces types back there would be drooling and gibbering by now, and while the kid was stunned, he wasn't afraid. No, the young cop wasn't doing so bad, all things considered. No worse than he had done, certainly. "This way. We want to stay on the green line this trip." He pointed at the floor. Edwards followed him, but kept looking back behind him like a leashed puppy who has spotted a squirrel and doesn't want to leave it behind.